Hey, Aaron, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. I guess I've been in sales for roughly probably 15 years, in kind of the tech business for about 17 and a half. I started out actually on a support line, supporting tech software for banks and implementing it for banks. And then I quickly learned in doing that I had a lot of joy in, seeing the customers really see the value out of the software that we offered. And then I had an opportunity to kind of get in on the front end as a sales engineer. So that's kind of where I started out in sales, is as a sales engineer, as a solution consultant, really supporting sales teams.
Yeah,
And that was a good start, and it got
that's
me
great.
into it.
But why'd you move into sales? Did you see they were driving nicer cars than you, or they?
It certainly got to that point. I think, when I look at it, there's always frustration as sales engineers are like, oh, I'm doing all the work, but I'm not getting any of the dough that goes with it. So it was one of those things that it was like a natural progression, but it's also something that a lot of sales engineers they can't handle the quota. That's a big step for someone.
It is, and the change in base, it
Hmm.
tends to be scary for some people who might have a lifestyle that is dependent on a firm amount of money coming in consistently.
Absolutely. I took a pay cut to go into sales, direct sales.
Yeah.
And you got to believe in yourself at the end of the day.
And how long did it take before you felt comfortable doing it, before it was your thing?
I want to say it was probably a good 10 years into the working world. I did a lot from a sales engineer standpoint and getting into kind of, teams and managing some of those types of roles. And then I kind of learned that I could do a lot more on my own. And that's also what brought me into leadership too, because at the end of the day, when I was a rep, I could still only kind of handle what I could control. And I wasn't being able to benefit the rest of the organization as I did as a sales engineer. So, that's ultimately what drove me into sales leadership, was that guide of I wanted to be able to support the sales team just like a sales engineer would, but I had more authority to go make the change that was needed to
Yeah.
drive new business.
And I've never sold to banks directly. What was that like?
It was at the end of the day. I mean, they like their money. I think with banks, it's really about finding uh, loan officers, the lending. What brings in the money to a bank.
Yeah.
And getting to that positive business driver that they have, just like in any other sale, you're trying to find that compelling that's going to move the needle to get them to buy.
And what was the impetus to join Scratchpad?
Yeah, with Scratchpad, it was like I actually bought Scratchpad for my last company. And when I was leading a team of, I had over a dozen AEs that were enterprise wide, honestly. And then sales engineers, I had customer success I was working with closely. And we need to give them a win. We needed a morale boost. And some of my best reps, and what was interesting is I was probably the second youngest person of my whole team.
Yeah.
So I had a very senior, experienced sales team who hated Salesforce. And even the best sales reps you have are probably the ones that are the worst about getting the information into Salesforce. And I'm in there leading this, having this big revenue number that I have to hit and forecasting 4 times a month, having to put a forecast together. I was like, oh, there's got to be a better way. And that's ultimately where I honestly, I heard you talking about it at one point, and we brought in Scratchpad. I fell in love with the product and the people, the company as a whole. And so I looked at investing in Scratchpad, and ultimately it came down to, I was kind of at a point, I was having some success, but it didn't come without a toll of traveling. I've been traveling for 17 years every other week.
Yeah.
And I have 2 daughters that are 10 and 13 now and wanting to be around. And I also the other side to that is everywhere I've been in sales and the companies I've been to, I went there after they were purchased. So it was one of that feeling of I wanted to get in somewhere on the ground and really help build it before that inflection point of, do you go public? Do you get bought?
Yeah.
That merger. Because I see a lot of people that, at the end of the day, getting absorbed, that's different. Both the last couple of companies are the same way.
Yeah. And plus, if you're a user of the product, you believe in the product, selling it and working with the company is a whole lot different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's, at the end of the day, you have to believe in what you're selling. And I think it's not just believing in what you're selling, but believing that there's true value for your customer. Because ultimately, if they can't find the value in what you're selling, you're not going to sell it.
Yeah. And how do you like leadership?
I love it. I love it. It's, at the end of the day, it's that I'm serving them. They don't work for me necessarily. I'm working for them. I think it's a matter of one of my best reps I ever had. When I first talked to him, I knew he was a rock star. And I said, hey, I'm coming in here, and he's looking at me, who are you, kid? and I'm sitting there going, hey, I'm going to get out of your way. I'm going to block and tackle, and I'm going to let you go hunt. I'm going to let you go score the ball. So, that was one of the first realizations of, it's not always about telling them what to do. It's allowing them to do what they do best.
Yeah. The telling's dangerous, because if they do exactly what you do, it may not work, and they're not going to take responsibility because they did what you told them to do, not what they believed in what to do.
Correct.
And I think that's the difference between like management and coaching. It's like, because they have to own it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't feel like they own it, they don't feel responsible for the outcome.
Yeah. And how are they going to grow if I'm overtaking calls, if I'm running the deal? They need to be able to, you have to let them, throw them in the water, let them swim sometimes. And, in sales, it's a lot of times it's sink or swim when you get into it.
And when you do a lot of air travel when you were the previous company?
I did quite a bit of air travel.
And that's not easy from where you live, is it?
No, I'm in Nebraska. So, there's not a direct connection to anywhere. It's nice. It's a great place to live. I wouldn't come visit here, but it's allowed me to go see a lot of things. I've been to all 50 states, and my family then can travel because I've gotten to be really good at the whole point system as well. So
yeah, I've been there several times, and I like it, but there's not much to it, right? It's a small city. It's a nice city.
It
nice
is
spread out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what were some of the key moments or pivot points in your career in sales? Because you have a great background, the support, the pre-sales is all good because you got the good foundation of what the product does, what the customer wants. But then you have to sell and close deals, which is very different.
It is. And at the end of the day, some of the things that I've seen is like, you had to learn and go get it. You weren't, outside looking in at sales, there's this interpretation of sales as order takers, as
you like it to be, right?
Yeah. And so you get into it. And I think one of the mistakes I made, even as a sales engineer early on, was the assumption that all they were doing was just taking calls and just bringing me to the deal to help sell it. There's so much more that's involved in sales than just getting the first meeting. So it's that realization that you have to understand that going into it, because otherwise you'll fail if you don't go into sales and that, outside full cycle sales without that mindset of it's not coming to you. You got to go get it.
That's it. Because as an SE, you're in constant demand from the customers, from the reps, from management, and you're highly valued.
Yes.
Then you get into sales and pretty much little to nothing's happening unless you make it happen.
Yes.
And you're not well valued outside of what you produce. That's what's valued.
Yes.
you as an entity are an expense until you produce something.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of organizations that are now realizing, I mean, I'm looking at some of my people I've brought on as sales engineers and that background. And I also look at that as great future salespeople, but they have to want it. It's nice to be able to, go to a client and not have to say, hey, I'll have to check with my sales engineer and let you know how this is. It's nice to already know it and speed up that sales cycle without having to go back and get the answers.
How did you learn how companies buy, how to get deals moving, how to avoid traps, how to prioritize your time on which deals?
Yeah, I think, ultimately what you have to learn is you have to learn like where you have to listen to the customer, and you have to be curious. You have to be, ask that third question that really gets to what's driving their initiative. Because if you can't align your product to their initiatives, you're going to have a really tough time going there. And to kind of counter that, it's also, you've got to be real about the opportunity. You learn real quick that if you don't want to spend all your time on something and be paddling upstream, you have to win fast and lose fast.
And how did you get that judgment? Because I got to believe, because I did the first year in sales. I remember I worked on a bunch of stuff that was totally worthless. It was a bunch of research projects, academic discussions, but they were interested. So I did it. They weren't going to buy anything. And I very quickly started developing my judgment of what's real and what's real this year.
Correct.
Yeah. How did you do that?
How did I do it? I think it's about creating those relationships to open up an honest line of communication. If you can get that rapport with someone, and what's funny these days, it's like if you can get into a texting relationship with your client, you're gold.
Yeah. That's kind of out of the rep zone if you're texting.
Yes. Yeah. And that's where you have to get to, it's not always the buyer, it's the influencer. It's someone that's going to give you the inside information of what the reality is versus what they're telling you up front.
Yeah. And it's often quite different, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah, because I mean, the people who are interested have no clue how hard it is to get something done internally at the company.
Yeah. We see that all the time. And, that's half the battle is leveraging people that, selling the software is not hard if you have a good product.
Yeah.
Getting it funded is a whole nother animal.
Yeah. And people don't recognize that. They think just because someone loves it, needs it, wants it, obviously the company has money and can afford it, doesn't mean they're going to buy anything.
Correct.
Yeah. And they didn't go to purchasing school, decision-making school, change the company class, right? They just said, it works. It helps me. I like it. Let's get it.
Yeah.
But that's when the business sale starts.
Yeah, it does. And it also is different based off of the market you're selling to. You can go sell an emotional sale to a smaller SMB company or a startup. When you're going into these enterprise sales, where I've sold a lot of my deals over the years were to, Fortune 500 companies. And, on the banking side of the business, it was the top 100 banks. These are very large deals, and there's procurement. There's so much more that goes into it to prove the value to get it funded. You can sell the buyers that it's going to improve their business and what they're doing today, but does the CFO care? Not really.
Well, not care nor understand.
Yes.
Right? Because they're thinking, well, we already bought this thing, use that.
Yes.
Right? Or did you look at everything? Right? They're kind of the parents.
Yeah.
Now, what's the contrast between selling to bankers and now selling to like sales leaders?
Honestly, from a banker standpoint, I would say selling to sales leaders is no different than selling to the head of commercial lending, the head of mortgage lending at a bank. They're all salespeople. at the end of the day, you look at, sales, they're all using Salesforce. All these banks, they're using Salesforce, whether you're a treasury sales officer, whether you're a commercial banker, they're doing the same thing, no different than a tech sales company or a services sales company that has those same roles. It's just a different title because they're in a bank.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think VPs of sales are under a lot more pressure than loan officers, no?
Well, you still have not just the loan officer, but the head of lending.
Okay.
So the head of
That's
lending
true.
is the VP of sales for
That's true.
for a bank.
Yeah.
And that's where, but it's different because there's security requirements. There's a lot more that's involved in a bank.
Yeah.
That, there's a lot more risk adverse than you would have with a lot of other companies.
Right. Because they're dealing with money.
Yes.
Right? They buy and sell money. Right. So and they're regulated, they're audited, they've got hundreds of years of process, and they've got anti-scamming and embezzlement in their core.
Yeah they do.
Sales leaders, because I've sold to sales leaders, they can be tough, right? They have like set beliefs in a lot of cases.
Yeah, they do, and if it's not their idea, it's tough. So that's the trouble with selling in a bottom-up motion sometimes, is that you could sell to their AEs. Well, that's not going to matter as much. It's not going to do anything. Yeah. So learning to go engage with, those rev ops leaders, the CROs, the VPs of sales, and saying, all right, how can we work with you to give your team a win and you get the credit?
Yeah. And you didn't have like product-led growth at the bank, right? In the previous roles.
No, it really wasn't. My products I worked with banks was all around process efficiency and going digital and getting rid of the paper, and automating and improving on your process. And so the biggest competitor for banks at the time, especially different ones where, they're judged also on how many employees they have and what their expense ratios are and things that way. So for us to be able to say, you can do more with less, that was the biggest thing that mattered, because they weren't going to reduce their headcount because that didn't look good in the communities that they were in.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was about aligning with, doing more with less. And it was tough because they are very ingrained in their processes. And we were dealing with some very senior bankers that we've just always done it this way. And when Check 21 came into play and everything's going electronic and digital and everything's going online, it was an uphill battle. That what was nice is some of it had to happen, but a lot of the products we were selling at the time on the efficiency side of workflows and things that way, it was not, we had to get beyond the nice to have.
Yes. And how did you get the technical sale with them? Was it the classic proof of concept, evaluation period, or how did you do that in a timely manner?
Yeah. I think that's where I had a lot of success in the sales engineer role, was because you have to have people in there that understand, and you're guiding them to ask the question, or you're answering the question that you want them to ask. So you're guiding them to it. It's based off of just understanding their business. And a lot of it had to do with the demo. It had to do with like, how are we presenting this to you? Because it was so foreign, but you had to apply it to their world.
Yes. And that's it, because it's either we apply it to their world or we hope that they will apply it.
Yeah. And that's a tough one.
And how's it working now? Because, product-led growth kind of hopefully gets you the technical sales started, where you don't have to prospect completely cold.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's something that we run into all the time. Like at Scratchpad, it's great. We have so much adoption, and the love of the product is amazing. But at the end of the day, we're learning that we can get more accomplished by having those meetings with RevOps leaders, with sales leaders up front. and really dictate from the top and come up with that mutual action plan that says, here's how we need to evaluate this product and give you the value that you need, because it's tough. And there's a lot of software out there that has free
versions.
Free versions. So, it's easy to get that adoption, if you have a great product. Then from there, it's how do you get the sale? Where do you go beyond free to what are those business drivers that we're going to go meet to go do that? And it's been great seeing the evolution in the startup of going from, selling directly to salespeople to moving into a RevOps leadership marketing role and really understanding what matters to them versus just the frontline AE or SDR, and knowing that customer success is in there too.
Yeah. And what do they care about? Because they don't have top line responsibility. They have a stack that they have to maintain, which is already a ball of twine.
It is. And that's partially how we, portray, Scratchpad, because we look at it and we say, overall, all these salespeople and RevOps, they have all these tools. Everyone's in their own workspace. You're going to have 5 different notes apps you might be using. You might have a customer success engine. I'm going to have a forecasting tool that I have. We're in Notion. We're in ClickUp. We're in all these other tools. And, there's nothing that really gets the most value out of those if you don't have all the information inputted into your core system of record, which for most people is Salesforce.
Yeah.
And so we create that value for all the applications.
And I think without something to make it easy, people fat finger it, right? They just fill in anything. And this is what gets me with sales leaders when they talk about being data driven. I go, yeah, but you're basing it off of fake data. So you're going to have fake answers.
Yeah. And fake forecast in many cases.
Fake forecast, fake everything. And you're all going to feel, I'm data driven. Well, putting a number against an opinion doesn't make it a fact.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I got to assume that sales leaders and RevOps wants real data in the CRM.
Absolutely. Because so much revolves around it. And at the end of the day, think about RevOps goes beyond just the sale. They have to go, implement and revenue the work. And so a lot of times you lose track of the sale, everything that goes from a sales engineer, SDR, BDR, all the way through the process. That collaboration and that data, if you can maintain consistency across those all the way through the revenue cycle, that's gold, because it creates that experience the customer needs. The customer's not going to have a good experience if they can tell that you're getting data from all these different systems and they're not matching up.
Yeah, both not matching up, and how do you make any sense out of it?
Correct.
Yeah. And what do you look for when you're hiring reps? What's your profile?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you have to have a personality. You got to have someone that they're going to want to talk to. Yes. Like at the end of the day, like if I'm on a call with someone who's trying to sell me something and they're flat and I'm like trying to pull something out of them, that's not going to work. At the end, you have to be able to have a delightful conversation to where they want to continue to talk to you. So that's step one. Step two is just understanding how to align those business drivers that the business has to why you need to buy the product. That how do you get that detail? And a lot of that is being curious about those leaders and what initiatives they might have and aligning your product to those. And that's not easy. You have to kind of pull it out of them. And that comes back to having a personality and a conversation and getting them to open up.
And that's a hard mix, because the people who are likable tend to be the talkers.
Yes.
But the people who are effective, can start the conversation, but really get curious and interested in what they're up against.
Mm-hmm. And you got to listen. It's that active listening throughout the conversation that really is going to drive the deal.
And have you found a way of surfacing that talent, the listening side of it. The talking side is easy. You know, they come in with a big smile and maybe tell a little story. And
yeah. I'm giving all these hundreds of applicants we're hiring now all these ideas. So we'll see if it comes back. But at the end of the day,
they won't listen.
You know, it's doing a mock session, you know, doing a discovery call and doing a mock call where they're gonna, you know, sell me, and not necessarily sell me, because I don't need you to know anything about the product. I need you to discover what matters to me.
Yeah.
And so that's how you can get it out of that interview process, is, you know, creating those personas. And so we have a process where we have a virtual on-site. We'll have one of our leaders in the organization outside of sales. We'll have me, we'll have our head of sales, and we're on this call and we're going to say, I'm this persona, I'm an AE, I might be a sales manager, I might be a rev ops leader over here, where Puyan might be that. And then you're going to discover what matters to us.
Yeah. And you're not going to do that by talking. You're going to do
Correct.
it by asking.
Yes.
Oh, can you give us an example of who's done it really well? Not by name, but what they did, the questions they asked.
Yeah, I think what's funny is probably one of the best. It's sad that it's Puyan. It's our founder, and it's how he created
He's curious,
the product. Yeah. He's curious, and I know you've been on his podcast, you know, and know him. But at the end of the day, he's also been one of the best coaches that we have to coach our AEs, to coach managers, our head of sales, to have that curiosity of asking maybe that second follow-up, to go, you said this, I heard you said this right here. Let me align and go one step deeper to go get the value answer that we need.
That's it. Because when I talk to him, I can just sense the curiosity in him, because it's a great combination of confidence and curiosity.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be confident during an interview, right? Because you're being judged, right?
Yeah.
It's not a casual conversation. It's a professional conversation where you're being judged. You're off kilter.
Yep.
You're not talking about what you're comfortable talking about. You're comfortable asking about something you don't understand that well.
Yeah. It's, you know, and it's also something that you want to get when you're interviewing a lot of people. You want to be able to weed out the professional interviewers.
Yes.
and really get and throw them curveballs, get them to, you know, think on the fly, because that's sales too.
Yeah.
You're going to get curveballs thrown at you, and these objections, how you overcome those objections is really going to drive that further.
Yeah, because you're certainly in the situation where the people have to want to talk with you, because they don't have to talk with you.
Absolutely.
Right? They can get a free version and it's easy to use. So there's probably not that many support questions. So you have to bring something to the table, and it has to start with likability.
Absolutely. And that's what's been great about the organization I'm in now. You know, everyone is likable, and it's just something that every interaction that our customers have with us, we have to want them to continue to talk to us. It doesn't matter whether you're a frontline answering a support question on a support email, a Slack, on, you know, responding to a review. It's all about creating the delight in those customers to want them to come back to us and talk.
Yeah. And what's the hardest part of your job?
Hardest part is really, it's the prioritization. When you have a ton of inbound leads that are coming in, where you have all these leads and everyone's like, oh, you have all these leads, you're building all this up. The hardest part is getting to those economic buyers and getting to the funding. It's easy to sell the product again. It's harder to get it funded. So it's the navigation of helping the customers build their own business case. Like you said, being able to coach them on how to get it funded, how to get it sold internally. That's where the real effort goes into. And so it's aligning with the metrics that they have, because there's not always a hard ROI.
Right. Yeah, because certainly sales leaders will get, well, it's part of their job. They can stay late.
Yeah. That's just an extra 2 hours to go update their pipeline every day. Like, yeah, they have time.
And from a budgeting standpoint, who typically owns it? Is it RevOps? Is it marketing? Is it sales?
It's typically like, if there's a CRO, obviously they're going to own it. If it's RevOps is really driving. They're the ones who own the budget. They're responsible for the budget, but they're ultimately listening to that head of sales, VP of sales, because that's what's keeping them in business.
Yeah.
It's actually at the end state there.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of, even on the sales tech side, marketing sometimes owns the budget because RevOps reports into them, because it started under marketing with the marketing automation stuff.
Yeah.
And then the leads turned into the sales leads.
Yeah. And that's where you see
CLO said,
SDR.
I don't want to manage.
Yeah. and they, and usually SDRs will report up through marketing.
Sometimes, yeah.
And that lead engine, we had that at a couple companies, and it was tough. So that's why I think you start seeing a lot more CROs. You didn't hear a CRO 10 years ago.
Right.
It was just head of sales, you had a marketing, you had head of delivery, and now, CRO's big. Customer success has turned into this.
It's a revenue driver now. Yeah.
It absolutely is. And at the end of the day, customer success is super important because there's 3 areas when you're selling, especially software. You have your new sales, your land, you have your renewals and your expansions.
Right.
And that's a team effort. Like it's too much for one rep. I think it's, as you learn in sales, that you don't want to overburden your rock stars with the entire piece. You have to support them. And so that's where customer success is taking on more of the account management and really driving the success of the product.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, Aaron, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect, follow you? And if you have any openings, feel free to share them.
Absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always out on LinkedIn all the time. Just wanting to reach out to different people, helping others that might have had a different background, wanting to get into sales. And absolutely, we're hiring. We are hiring at AEs today. We're really looking for those enterprise mid-market. We're trying to kind of we're getting a lot of new interest from really large companies. So we need a little bit more experience going after that. So if you're in the market as a mid-market AE or enterprise AE, we'd love to have you apply.